In Yerevan, several dozen parents of Armenian conscripts went to a protest action with the demand to transfer their son's place of service from Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia. Parents of Armenian conscripts complained about the conditions of service in Nagorno-Karabakh. They went to a protest rally in Yerevan, at which they demanded to confirm the information on the compliance with the ceasefire regime in the conflict zone. Recently, several dozen parents of conscripts have come to a protest action in front of the Vazgen Sargsyan Military University in Yerevan. The protesters opposed sending their children to serve in Nagorno-Karabakh. The matter concerns the soldiers who have come to Armenia on vacation and must return to their positions. We do not want our children to go to Nagorno-Karabakh because the road is unsafe. There are no guarantees that they will reach the place alive. We want assurances from the Ministry of Defense that our children will serve on the territory of Armenia, said one of the protesters. The protesters have requested a meeting with the spokesperson for the Armenian Ministry of Defense. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who is under harsh criticism from the country's dominant church in connection with the recent war with Azerbaijan, stayed away from Christmas services. Pashinyan was self-isolating due to the coronavirus pandemic, spokeswoman Maine Grigoryan said. He contracted the virus in June, and it was not clear if he had been reinfected. He also has been widely denounced in Armenia for signing a November ceasefire agreement that ceded parts of the separatist Nagorno-Karabakh region, and large swaths of surrounding territory to Azerbaijan. About 3,300 Armenian servicemen were killed in the war, and the territorial cessation forced thousands of Armenians to flee their homes. The ceasefire sparked weeks of demonstrations calling for Pashinyan's resignation. Armenian Apostolic Church head Catholicos Gergin II and other top clerics have called for him to step down. Nikol Pashinyan's opponents are angry at a peace deal that ended 6 weeks of fighting over the separatist region, but saw Azerbaijan take over wide areas that have been controlled by Armenian forces for more than a quarter century. Armenia's opposition parties gave Pashinyan an ultimatum to resign in a short time. He has ignored the demand, defending the peace deal as a bitter but necessary move that prevented Azerbaijan from overrunning the entire Nagorno-Karabakh region. About 15,000 protesters marched through downtown Yerevan to the parliament building. Protests have grown over the past weeks, with demonstrators blocking traffic in various sections of the capital, and also rallying in other cities. Undeterred, the Prime Minister told lawmakers in Parliament that the nation needs consolidation. In the current difficult period, voices of different groups mustn't be mistaken for the people's voice, he said. Speaking outside Parliament, Artur Vanitsyan, the former head of the National Security Service, argued that Pashinyan should step down to allow opposition forces to normalize the situation in the country. He said, each day he stays on the job raises a new threat to the nation. Gevorg Tasunyan's article titled, Why Armenians' Street Opposition is Unable to Garner Mass Support, and Tadal Hakobian's article titled, Nikol Pashinyan, An Elected Catastrophe, give more details about the process. Hours before the signing of this statement, 17 opposition forces in Armenia demanded the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. This group included the second largest party in parliament, Prosperous Armenia, as well. The former ruling Republican Party that was overthrown in 2018. Only one party of the 16 holds seats in the current parliament. To this day, the group, which now consists of 16 parties, continues organizing protests, mainly in the country's capital Yerevan. The opposition holds rallies and closes major streets, using the same methods that Pashinyan himself and his supporters used during the 2018 Velvet Revolution. The fact that the opposition has been unable to attract large masses can be explained by the following reasons. First, who in fact support the Prime Minister's resignation do not wish to be affiliated with the leadership of the street protests, they distrust those leaders, and do not hear solution-oriented steps. Second, in this post-war period, Armenians are feeling depressed, exhausted and politically passive. Third, many are still mourning the deaths of those killed in the war. Black ribbons still hang in many Armenian streets, displaying the names and ages of those killed in the war. Fourth, there are many soldiers, volunteers, and reservists who agree with the thesis put forward by the government, which is that following the fall of Shusha, Azerbaijani forces would have entered Stepanakert and struck towards any direction from which Armenian forces had not retreated. Therefore, they believe that the trilateral statement signed on November 9, no matter how heavy and catastrophic, prevented an even greater catastrophe. Nikol Pashinyan is a catastrophe that was elected by 70% of Armenia's population. It is painful and dangerous, especially when those who elected the Prime Minister, the Parliamentary Civil Contract Party and the My Step majority faction, do not recognize this. They continue to live in the Velvet Armenia of 2018. But that Armenia no longer exists. They continue to admire and be inspired by a version of Pashinyan that doesn't exist. Pashinyan is not Transcaucasia's first disaster. In the early 1990s, Georgia and Azerbaijan had their own philosophically driven leaders. Zviad Gamsakhurdia and Abulfaz Elchaibi, respectively, and both brought forth disasters to their countries. Both were elected by the people, just like Pashinyan. Georgia, and to some extent Azerbaijan, became involved in a catastrophic civil war, and suffered crushing defeats in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Karabakh. But Armenia, while in a blockade, under the rubbles of the 1988 earthquake, with 300,000 refugees, somehow avoided internal political unrest, and won a war that was forced upon it. From 1991 to 1994, Armenia has not remained without internal political crises, but none have led to a civil war. But Pashinyan, who came to power on the wave that saw the public rejection of former President Serge Sargsyan, was not able to use the historic opportunity. His first signs of failure were his approach to politics based on personal affiliation, and his incomprehensible abandonment of institutional reform. Unaware or unwilling to accept that the situation in the country has changed since the 2018 Velvet Revolution, Pashinyan indirectly gives legitimacy to those who have taken to the streets, who by and large are not trusted by the people. They are the rejected opposition, the former government. Vladimir Sikor discusses another important point in his article titled, Armenia's 44-Day War, a Self-Inflicted Trauma, on Jamestown. Robert Kocharian and Serge Sarkisyan must be hoping to capitalize on their long-standing Kremlin connections to regain a measure of political influence in Yerevan. In mid-December, Kocharian and Edmund Marukian visited Moscow simultaneously. Whether this was a joint visit remains unclear. Russian President Vladimir Putin cabled Christmas/New Year personal greetings to Kocharian. For the time being, at least, any Armenian opposition politician seeking Moscow's favor must not contest the terms of the armistice outright. At the most, he may propose tinkering with matters that the armistice does not directly regulate, such as the demarcation of certain border sectors. Moscow has elucidated that it wants compliance with the armistice terms, and it will work with those Armenian politicians who deliver both compliance and stability. Nationalist politicians' mold do not fit that bill and are unusable to Russia. On the first day of the war on September 27, Pashinyan announced that he was ready to die for Armenia. It turns out, however, that he is not even ready to sacrifice his seat for the sake of the homeland. It should not be ruled out that Pashinyan and his team will be able to hold on to power. But at what cost? It doesn't matter what price Pashinyan and his team pay. Each day that Pashinyan remains in his position as Prime Minister is at the expense of the nation. At the expense of the sovereignty, the dignity, and the future of this